stop, don't stop.
Exactly. You can't do certain things on, you know, before mincha time. And now the Gemara wants to clarify exactly what is this mincha time that we spoke about, that you cannot go ahead and sit in front of a barber close to mincha time, right? He said you can't go ahead and you have to pray first. You can't go into the bathhouse, into the wash house till you pray mincha. Tannery. Can't eat. And the one of the commentators say it's not specifically these activities. Anything that's obviously similar to these activities would all be forbidden. And these are type of activities. Um, the Magen Avram says just so you can't enter into the tannery right before mincha because you're going to get caught up. You might forget to pray. So too, you can't start any type of activity that's similar to this. And some commentaries explain that's a type of activity that you constantly you don't stop. You're constantly active in that type. It's a long job, so to speak. Like you don't stop in the middle of a haircut. You don't stop in the middle of a tanning process. But a type of activity that's very easy to stop in the middle, they continue at a later time, like stitching something, or you're writing. Tailors start something, they stop something, or writing that you could go ahead and start. That's not a concern that you might get caught up. That's how some commentators explain. So let's go back. Let's start the Gemara on 9b1. Hi Samach Mincha. The Mishnah stated that you can't do these activities close to Mincha time. Now, the Gemara is going to identify something called Mincha Gedola and Mincha Katana. Mincha Gedola, as the Prisha on the Torah writes, Gedola means like Od Hayom Gadol. There's a long day. Mincha Gedola means like early on in the day. There's a time called Mincha Gedola. What's called Gedola? There's a lot of time left. That's, let's say, a half hour after 12 o'clock, afternoon time, so to speak. Half afternoon, which is, let's say, 6.5 hours into the day. 6.5 hours into the day is already the time to pray mincha. That's the time for mincha. Now, but there's another time called mincha katana. Mincha katana means, katana is like short, small. It's a small window, a small amount of time to left, which means you're already 9.5 hours into the day. In the example that we gave yesterday, if a day begins at 6 a.m. and concludes at 6 p.m., so 9.5 hours into the day would be 3:30 p.m. in the afternoon. That's called mincha katana. It's a small amount of time left. Now, what is going on over here that we have something called mincha gadola, mincha katana? We don't have something called shachrit gadola, shachrit katana. We don't have something called arvit gadola, arvit katana. So what are these two ideas? So the Prisha explains, Simon, I think Reish Lamed Gimel, that there's something called the starting time for mincha, and there's something called the main time for mincha. It would seem he understands that the ideal time for mincha is mincha katana, is later on in the day, but that's exactly when they brought the offering. When they brought the korban, they brought it during the later part of the day. At that, it was actually processed at 9.5 hours into the day. So that's called the ideal time to bring the korban, and therefore that's called mincha katana. We're mentioning that as a specific, its own window of time. However, they had an allowance, and one time a year they actually brought it on this early, like Pesach. On Pesach time, they brought it 6.5 hours into the day, which is, let's say, 12:30, which is the Mincha Gedolah, which is when there was a lot of time left in the day because they had to process all the Korban Pesachs. And the Korban Pesachs took a lot of time. Every person, every family would need depending on the size of the family, they had you had to slaughter a sheep and process, sprinkle some blood on the Mizbeach, So that took time, and therefore they had to go ahead and do it earlier in the day. In general, the last offering of the day, the law is in general would be the afternoon offerings, and therefore it made sense that they brought it later on in the day. But Pesach was an exception to that rule. So therefore, that's why there's something called Mincha Gedolah and Mincha Katana. Is that clear, David? Good morning, Asaf. So now the Gemara wants to understand how far and what time period, which mincha, samuch lemincha, close to mincha. Which mincha? Is referring to the mincha gedola part, which would be earlier in the day, or mincha katana, which is later on. So in our example, if it's close to mincha gedola, it'll be 12 p.m. 12 o'clock, noontime. That would be samach lemincha gedola. Samach lemincha katana would be close to 9.5 hours. That would be 9 hours in the day, which would be 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So that's the question of the Gemara. Hi samuch lemincha. Do we say it's referring to the Mincha Gedolah, that close to the Mincha Gedolah time, that you cannot go ahead and start the haircut, start these activities? The Gemara says, "Amai, why shouldn't you be able to start these activities close to Mincha Gedolah at 12 o'clock noon? There's plenty of time. They've got it. There's a lot of hours into the day. Ella, so what do you want to say? Samech lemincha katana. Well, probably he means close to the mincha katana, close to that short window of mincha that's left. That would be 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So you're already getting close to evening. So then the Gemara has a different question. It says imitchilu emafsikin, right? The Mishnah stated that if you began the activity, even though you should not have began the activity, but the rabbi said that if you did not follow the law, you began the activity, emafsikin, you do not have to stop. You can continue doing your activity as long as you have enough time after you finish to finish your meal, finish the tannery, finish the court case. You have enough time to pray. You don't have to stop. The Gemara says, but you know what? Neima to have a tiyufta. This would be a tiyufta. This would be a refutation, a knockout on the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. On the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, the Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, Kivon she'egia zman hamincha. Rabbi Levi says, once the time of mincha, of tefillat mincha has come, you're not allowed to asul adam sheyitom klum. You're not allowed to taste anything. Kodem sheyispalel tefillat mincha. You're not allowed to taste anything once the time of mincha came. Now we'll have to identify what does it mean by taste, but you can't taste anything before you daven mincha. So what does it imply? So what it implies is that if he says you can't taste anything before you daven mincha, the Gemara is understanding that it's not just you can't begin a meal. The Gemara understands that you can't even you have to even stop a meal, right? Because the question is, what's the question? I'm Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Maybe Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, is referring to you can't start, and so maybe everyone agrees you can't start, and maybe it means you can't start. But maybe if you started, maybe you have a right to continue. But the Gemara understands, Tosfos points out, that the Gemara understands by the fact that he says, Asur litum, he says you can't taste anything. So that implies it doesn't make a difference whether you started at the right time, or you started whether you started, at which time that you started. Meaning, not only if you started in a forbidden time, right? Good morning, Ralph. Good morning, Emmanuel. Tosfos points out that even the language of Asul, good morning, everybody. When it says you're not allowed to, Rabbi Shmuel Malevi says that once the time of mincha has come, you're not allowed to taste anything. You can't eat until you pray. Now, when, now, does that mean what about if you started, right? You started, that language says you can't eat anything until you pray. So that means even if you began, it doesn't mean, see, it doesn't say you can't begin until you pray. See, if it would have said, don't, once the time of mincha came, you shouldn't begin certain activities. Or the fact, the Gemara's understanding that the language of asolitom, that you can't taste anything, implies that even though you began, you have to stop. That's how the Gemara understands this language. Now, the fact that the Gemara understands that you have to stop would be a contradiction to what our Mishnah stated. Our Mishnah stated that even though you were not allowed to begin, but you could finish. And his language that he says you're not allowed to taste anything before you, that once the time of mincha is here, has come, you can't go ahead and taste anything before you pray mincha, would seem to indicate that even if you began, the Gemara's understanding, you have to stop. Because, I'll tell you like this. The language of the Mishnah says, I don't want you to go ahead and begin to eat. The Mishnah stated, don't eat before you go ahead and pray. Right? That was the language of the Mishnah says, actually, lo le'echol. Don't eat until you pray. But don't eat until you pray. The Gemara understands, says, okay, I shouldn't eat until I pray. But if I went ahead, but if I went ahead and I did eat, I could go ahead and what? And continue. Meaning there's a lachatchila, don't do this. I don't want you to eat until you pray. But if you went ahead and you did eat, the Mishnah says, but what happened if you didn't follow? If you went ahead and you did eat? So comes the Mishnah says, if you ate, you could continue eating. But here, Rabbi Shmuel Levi is already talking about, it already happened. It's now the time of mincha. The time of mincha has come. What do I do? Now that mincha has come, and he says, I don't want you to eat. So he's saying he doesn't want you to eat. The Gemara understands that even if you started, the mincha's here, you got to stop. So the Gemara says, so now is our Mishnah, seems like it's contradicting his opinion. So do we say that there's an argument over here? So the Gemara says, and really we're going to follow our Mishnah over Rabbi Shmuel Malevi's opinion. So what does the Gemara answer? So the Gemara says, lo olam, really, samach lemincha gedola. Really, our Mishnah, when the Mishnah says you cannot go ahead and eat, you should not go ahead and eat until you pray, is talking about early on in the day, even noontime. Once noontime has come, you're a half hour within the time of mincha, the opening bell of mincha. You should not start. You should not start a meal. You should not go. You should not do. You should not start. Now, by the way, even though Rabbi Shmuel Levi said the words you're not allowed to taste, but he doesn't mean having a fruit. He doesn't mean you can't have a fruit. You can't have certain those type of foods. That's very temporary. Most probably he means you have a real meal. So he's referring to really you can't start a meal, you can't start your haircut already at noontime, according to this approach of the Gemara. But then we're back, what? But the obvious question is, what's the problem? If you're starting so early in the day at noon, and the window of mincha is from noon to 6 o'clock, let's say when you have a 12-hour day, so why should you have to stop? Why should you not be able to start a meal at 12 o'clock? Why should you not be able to take a haircut at 12 o'clock? There's so many hours in the day. But the Gemara says we're talking about a different type of haircut, different type of meal. But the spored ben elasa. It was a haircut, ben elasa. He spent a lot of money to learn how to do the haircut. It was a special haircut that the Kohen Gadol used to take. The Kohen Gadol would get a haircut every week, and it was a special haircut that each hair, Rashi says, was a type of haircut that he did not cut his whole. He did not cut his whole hair. He would leave each hair, a little bit of each hair, so the top of this hair would be next to the root of the other hair, of the next hair. It was done in a very sophisticated, very tedious type of haircut. And since it was done in such a the tip of one hair was next to the base of the other hair. And since it was done in such a tedious way, the guy could get really caught up in this haircut and really forget to pray. I mean, it's hard to imagine that such a haircut should take 6 hours. You know what I'm saying? But when you're doing such a job, such a tedious job, and the Gemara continues. The Gemara says, so when you say Lola Merchatz, so what's the problem going to the bathhouse, taking your bath, at 12 o'clock? Because they're not talking about just going for a bath. We're talking about Kula Miltad Merchatz, to go the whole 9 yards, the full gamut of what a person goes to the bathhouse. He wants to shampoo his head. He wants to wash his body with hot water and then with cold water. And then he also wants to sweat up in there. He wants to take a steam bath as well. They call it a schwitz. So therefore, these could take a lot of time. And also, the person, I think, could also get very, knocks a person out, all that heat, and that could cause him to miss out, and he won't take daven mincha. And the Gemara continues, Lula Bursiki. So what's the problem going into the tanner, to tannering some of the animal skins? The Gemara says we're not talking about tannering, doing one skin. We're talking about La Bursiki Gedola. He has many skins to tan, and we're talking about the beginning of the process, and it's a long process. It takes a lot of time and a lot of skins and so he might come to get carried away in his activity, in his job, that type of work, and he might miss praying. And therefore, and also, what's the case? You can't go ahead and eat once the noon has come. Talking about Sudah Gedola, but to a big meal, like a wedding meal or a Brit Milah. So now you have your wedding meal. Let's say you have a Sunday afternoon wedding, right? A Sunday afternoon wedding, and they're having they start at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock in the morning. Now you want to go ahead and wash for the bread at 12 o'clock, 12:30, whatever time you're going to wash early, that meal goes, we all know a wedding meal goes, who knows how long a wedding meal goes. So don't wash. Once noon has come, don't wash on the bread. First daven mincha and then wash. That's what, if you notice by a lot of weddings also, when it comes to arvit, it comes to mincha, many people, they daven mincha, arvit right before the chuppah or right after the chuppah. Right after the chuppah, there's a minyan. They make a minyan because you're going to, before you go wash on bread, you should really go ahead and have minyan. You're not supposed to really wash, have to, eat the meal without having praying. It's time for Arvit. Like say now, this time of the year, right? When the chuppah is over. It's nighttime already. You should not be washing on a meal. You have to pray. You have to pray first. So that is velo ledin. And the Gemara says, what are we talking about when it comes to not going into the court? We're talking about. We're talking about. The Gemara says. We're talking about B'tchilatin, the beginning of a court case. The beginning of a court case, till everybody, makes their claims and gives their, the litigants, the plaintiff, the defendant, and a lot of time could pass, and there's a concern that he'll miss out the time for mincha. We heard yesterday, one of the guys said yesterday he was at a arbitration or whatever it was, and it was like Friday. They had to just stop. Morning. They had to stop the arbitration because he had to go get home for Shabbat. You can imagine if it would not have been Shabbat, it would have been what will happen to mincha? You go into such a detailed, time-consuming type of process. Therefore, the first thing you do is you have to go ahead and pray. And I was speaking with some, practically speaking, when you come home at night, if you're not going to a minyan later in the evening, you should really be praying first. You shouldn't really be eating first before. Now, if you're having a taste, you want to have fruit, you want to have something light, that should not be an issue. But if you're having a formal meal, you should not be really having a formal meal until you go ahead and pray. Somebody told me that, Rabbi, I've missed Arvit a number of times. And the reason why he missed Arvit a number of times because he didn't follow this law. He didn't follow the law that when you come home, you go ahead and you pray first. Pray before you say, I gotta. Now, how long does Arvit take? Of course, everyone davens with a lot of intent, kavanah. How long does it take? 10 minutes, 15 minutes? How long does Arvit take when you're not with a minyan? Not a long time period, but the Yetzer Hara tells you do it later. And before you know, it's already. Yesterday, a guy came over to me and said, Rabbi, I missed Arvit the night before. Here we are learning about the subject, and like the guy comes over to me, Rabbi, I missed Arvit. What do I do? It's the morning time now. So you have to make up. You have to say what he does is you have to do a double Amidah. That means after you pray Shachrit, you do your Amidah by Shachrit, for Shachrit, and then after you took back the 3 steps, you wait a few seconds. Morning makeup. That's why you come to the class, David. How do you like that? You make up for the night. If you missed if you missed the night, right? No. If you missed it, now if you missed it, not if a person was negligent and intentionally missed it. If a person fell asleep, forgot whatever it was, you make it up. The next tefillah, the next time you have a window of the next prayer, make up the previous prayer. So therefore, last night's Arvit, person missed Arvit last night. This morning, after he does his Amidah, takes us 3 steps back, then he waits a few seconds, and then he goes forward and he does the makeup. That will be the makeup for last night's Arvit that he missed. Similarly, if a person missed Shachrit by Mincha, he'll repeat the Amidah, the second Amidah to make up Mincha. Similarly, at Arvit, a person missed Mincha, so what will he do by Arvit? The same thing. The second Amidah, he'll do a second Amidah to make up the mincha that he missed. By the way, that's a great, there's certain things the Gemara says in Brachot that you can't make up. Meaning, if a guy missed the Kriya Shema in the morning, guy missed saying Kriya Shema in the morning, now it's already past the time for Kriya Shema, it's already too late. Meaning, Kriya Shema really has a certain time. People need to be aware of. You have to say Kriya Shema by 3 hours into the day, right? And the question is, the day, the question how to clock it. When does the 3 hours begin? Well, how to break up the day. But let's say today, 3 hours into the day, and in these days, it's around 9 o'clock in the morning, 10 to 9, let's say 10 to 9, according to one opinion, and the other opinion is around 9:40. We have two opinions about what the time for. The question is, how do you calculate the day? Does the day go from sunrise to sunset? 3 hours starts from sunrise, which is a later opening bell, because sunrise is very late today. Sunrise is after 7 o'clock sometime, right? So you have 3 hours after that. But again, the hours are, how do you break up the day? It's to take the sunrise, sunset, break it into 12 parts. Or do you count from dawn till evening? That dawn is like around 72 minutes or so before sunrise. And it's a much earlier beginning, but the day is longer, but you go into, and then you break it into 12 parts. But the end of the day is you have a certain window of time to say the Shema. But if you miss, let's say a guy gets up today at 9:40, and he didn't say the Shema, he lost the biblical mitzvah of Shema. And therefore, it's very important on Shabbat morning or Sunday morning when people pray late, that they have to make sure to get up on time to say the Shema, or to say the Shema. Yeah, and also people are up in the morning, they're reading the paper, I don't know, whatever they're doing, and they don't say the Shema. They come to synagogue and they miss the time for the Shema. So they have to realize, if the synagogue, the minyan and the synagogue, if you go into the first minyan, you don't have to say this, you don't have to worry about it. They'll make it on time. But if you go to a 9 o'clock minyan, 9:30 minyan, whatever, and a lot of the Chabad minyanim are very late in the morning. I'm not coming to criticize Chabad, but I'm just saying, but you have to be aware. Many of them start at 10 o'clock, right? 10 a.m. You were in college once upon a time, right? So what time was the Chabad minyan in college, right? The Hasidim, so a lot of the Hasidim, a reason why Hasidim generally start late originally was because of the preparation for the prayer. They want to say Tehillim, they want to go to the mikveh, they want to learn, they want to do a lot of things to put themselves in the right mindset of praying. But with that being said, it still can't come at the expense of saying Kriya Shema in the right time.
Wake up 9:30.
Right. So you should really say the Birkat HaTorah, at least the Al Divrei Torah, Varevna Asher Bacha Banu Mikol Amim, and Yivrach Hashem Sama Shmi. At least the bracha on Torah, because since you can be saying all the psukim of Shema, so
the most part saying go get to minyan that's in encapsulate all the prayer, no?
But technically, let's say for myself, on Shabbat many times I daven at a minyan. They happen to start 9:15. Okay, so now what do I do with the Shema? So I go to Shabbat. I don't have to, but so I say this. I get up in the morning. The first thing you wash your yadayim, and you just say Birkat HaTorah. I don't need to say all the other brachot. That I could wait. I don't have to say it now. But the first thing is say Birkat HaTorah, and then say Shema, the 3 parts of Shema. That's the way to go ahead and do it. I got the mitzvah min HaTorah. Now you should also know there's something called Zman Tfilah, prayer time. Meaning a person wakes up, goes to 11. If I go to a 10 o'clock minyan, and they're going to reach the Amidah at 10:40, that's already most probably past the Zman Tfilah. Meaning to say, there's something Gemara says in Brachot, there's something called prayer time. The window of Shachrit, let's say, goes until noon. But really, there's something called the time for Shachrit, the ideal time that Shachrit should be said, the Zman Tefillah is by 4 hours into the day. Same way we said that Shema has 3 hours into the day, you have until 3 hours, but the Shachrit, that means that's till 4 hours into the day. So if I go to a 10 o'clock minyan, I'm missing that Zman Tefillah, most probably, at least at this time of the year. But I'm davening, I'm getting in the tefillah, I'll get credit for davening Shachrit, but I'll lose, the Gemara says, Zman Tefillah. Therefore, it's not really all these late minyanim. It's hard to tell the young guys this, but all the late minyanim that they're going to reach the Amidah at a very late time, they could be missing out something. They could be missing out as Zman Tefillah. So that's why you have to beware. But what I wanted to point out is that in contrast to if a guy missed last night Avid, which technically he could, which is bad news. You shouldn't miss Avid, but he can technically make up the Arvid, at least the Amidah, he can make up the Amidah by saying a second Shema Amidah in Shachrit. But there's no making up the Kriya Shema of last night. You missed Shema last night, you lost. You don't have that. There's no makeup opportunity. So there's certain things in life that you miss out, you lost. You can't make up. There's certain things that you could make up. So that's just morning, Gary. The people need to be aware of that, and that's a very practical. Now, people might be in a position of being in a place when they want to know what time should we call out minyan tomorrow, right? You have a bar mitzvah, you have a wedding, bar mitzvah, and everybody's away, and we're going to figure out the time for Shachrit, right? So you want to figure out the time for Shachrit, you should be sensitive to the Zman, the time of Tefillah, to make sure that you know what time of the year you're on. Look at the clock. There's a very good app, I think, myzmanim.com. Or you look at myzmanim.com or wherever, you'll see, what's the appropriate, what are the times. And also there's another point. You'll see listed Sof Zman Kriya Shema, right? What's Sof Zman Kriya Shema mean? The end of the time for Kriya Shema. So let's say there are two opinions on the Shema, two main opinions. One says you should say the Shema, let's say by 8:50, 8:45, let's say, which is the one that you try to do first. There's another Zman that says 9:40, 9:35, let's say, right? So let's talk about Shabbat morning. So let's say I want to do what's the ideal. The Sfardim really go for the first Zman, by the way. They go for that early Zman, which let's say around 8:40, whatever it is. So a person's going to daven at the 9 o'clock minyan. So when is he going to say the Shema? 8:30. If it's close, he has until 8:40. So Gary, he might say, okay, I'll say it at 8:30. I have until 8:40, I'll say it at 8:30. But that's also not proper. Why not? We have a different rule called Zrizim Makdimim Mitzvot. When you have a mitzvah to do, you're supposed to wait to the last minute to do the mitzvah. You're supposed to do the mitzvah the sooner that you can do the mitzvah. You do it the sooner you can do the mitzvah. So if I know I'm davening at a late minyan, Mr. Tawili here, what's your first name? What's your first? Sol. Hey, Sol, if I know I'm davening at a 9 o'clock minyan on Shabbat, and I'm going to be careful to say the Shema before the first Zman, before 8:40, whatever that is. When am I supposed to say the Shema? I'm up at 7 o'clock. So I'm supposed to say it really, Gary, when at 7 o'clock. From what rule is that, Rabbi? That's a separate rule that applies to all mitzvot, not to delay mitzvot. Gary, what do you say about that?
Well, that's okay. Here, but usually it's like 10 minutes, 5 minutes before time. Because the right way to do it.
But the question is, what minyan are you going? You might be going to an early 9 o'clock. If you go to
8:15.
8:15. 8:15.
Let's say Shema is 8:40. Early Shema. So they stop right at certain points. Let's say at the Shema. Before that, they did early Shema, and then they say Shema.
And then but you're saying, because there you're actually saying with the tzibur, and you're
That's what I'm saying.
a 9 o'clock minyan.
say, let's wait like what you say, right after Shabbat.
Right, that's the point. The point would be, and if you're doing it, if you're praying at, if you go into a 9 o'clock minyan, which many of the new generation is going to the 9 o'clock, what? Yeah, right. The new generation. It's not my generation. Even it's not our generation. It's the new generation. That most of them are going to. I think so. A lot of them are going to 9 o'clock minyan. So therefore, they should be going ahead and saying the Shema when they get up in the morning, not wait to the last. And we all know when you wait close to the time, you get caught up. You can get caught up in something, and when you get too close to the fire, the people get burnt sometimes. So that's something that we need to realize. And also, it's also when it comes to Friday night when people, let's say every night people are davening Arvit very early, right? So it's also now we're supposed to repeat the Shema. When you daven Arvit before the stars come out, the midst of the night Shema should be repeated. So some people might say, Rabbi, I'll rely on my Kriya Shema Lamita. Before I go to sleep, I say the 3 parashiyot. But now the question is, does a person sometimes fall asleep before he says the 3 parashiyot? Does it happen? A person just, the next thing you know, it's the morning. How many times you sit down on a couch and the next thing you know, it's the morning already. So therefore, I would say also better not to wait to rely on Kriya Shema Lamita when you go to sleep. Better, I would say, when it's nighttime, morning, you go ahead, say the Shema, because you prayed early. There's a question whether you got credit for that Shema of the nighttime Shema, because it was what it was, a twilight. It was after sunset before it was really dark. So therefore, better not to delay and go ahead when you say the Shema when when it becomes dark. I want to wish everyone a beautiful day, and we'll see everyone hopefully tomorrow. Take care, Ralph.